All right, chapter 5, we get into the idea of probability. First section's pretty quick and easy. We talk about experimental probability. Okay, experimental probability simply is the idea of conducting an experiment to see what the probability of some event is. So we all are pretty confident with the idea that if we flip a coin, 50% of the time it's going to be heads, 50% of the time it's going to be tails. But now what if I have a thumbtack and I want to know what's the probability if I throw that thumbtack up in the air, how often is it going to land with the pin piece pointing up? Okay, pins are different. Okay, so what I actually do is I go through and I do 100 flips of it. Okay, and what I do is I keep track how many times I have a success. Okay, and then that becomes my experimental probability. Okay, so we'll get into it later. Yes, theoretically, okay, heads is half the time. Experimentally, okay, I could do it 50 times, okay, and 27 of those could be heads. Okay. Now, what it happens is our law of large numbers says as we do things more and more and more and more, that this will get closer to, my experimental will get closer to the theoretical. Okay, so if I keep flipping coin over and over and over and over again, it's going to get closer and closer to that 50%. You know, obviously, there's going to be times when it's not going to be exactly 50%. You know, on flip 1001, okay, I could have 500 heads, 501 tails. Okay, but it gets closer and closer and closer, and that's kind of your definition of probability that we'll get to. All right, so what we can do then sometimes is simulate experimental probability, because it could take me a long time to flip 1,000 coins, but I could do it on the computer really quickly. And so one of the things we're going to use a lot throughout this book is what we call our 4-step process. Okay, and in that 4-step process, we have 4 things we have to do. Obviously, state, plan, do, and conclude. Okay, anytime you're doing something statistically, you have to have a question of interest. Okay, and so maybe in this case, it's what proportion of flips land heads. Okay, so that's my question of interest, and maybe even what proportion of 1,000 flips land heads. Okay, that's the question I want to come to at the end and answer. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate it. Okay, how to use a chance device. Now, chance device, what they're saying is that it could be, you know, a coin itself. Sometimes that we use. We can use dice. Okay, and what we're also going to use is a random digit table. Okay, and so the 2 things we have to do is we have to label. Okay, and so that's going to be saying, okay, with the coin, heads is heads, tails is tails. Okay, with the dice, I could say 1, 2, and 3 represent a head, 4, 5, and 6 represent a tail. Sorry. With the random digits table, odds are heads, evens are tails. Okay, or I could even just go 0 is heads, 1 is tails. Okay, and when we get to the calculator, we can make that even easier. And then I go to my table or whatever I'm using. Okay, so that's kind of the idea of your chance device. Many repetitions. Okay, it's like we talked about back with experiments. You need replication. You have to have enough subjects. And then at the end, what were my results? Okay, so that's going to be our 4-step process, and we really get into that when we start getting into inference with confidence intervals and significance tests.